Welcome to the Blair Museum of Lithophanes. I am Mary Karazim, one of the volunteers here at the museum that houses the collection of one man, Laurel Blair, who was a realtor here in the city of Toledo, but who had a lot of adventures and collections way beyond that. His lithophane collection, it was close to 3,000 pieces at the time that he decided to donate his collection to the city of Toledo. And the city of Toledo provided this Blair Museum and this space, which is coordinated and run by a crew of volunteers. Now, Lithophanes is a European art form that was very popular in Europe during the 19th century, and they were byproducts of the important porcelain factories, especially in Germany and France. So this is a lithophane, and the word comes from two Greek words, litho, which means stone, and phane, which means to light up or to illuminate. So if you look at this piece of porcelain, it doesn't look too exciting as I hold it in my hand. It's smooth on one side and has a texture on the front. But in this little demonstration that Mr. Blair made, if we light the lithophane from the front, nothing really exciting happens. Or if we light it from both sides. But if we light it only from the back, then the image comes through. And you can see the castle and the trees and all the texture and all the details that are a part of the lithophane. Now, to create the lithophanes in the factory, the first step comes with a very talented artist who is given an image by the powers that be in the factory, and he takes that image and carves it into beeswax. So this is a beeswax carving that's over 100 years old, but he would use tools that were very much like dental tools, and had to take into consideration where he wanted a lot of light to come through, so he went deep into the beeswax. Where he didn't want the light to come through, then he has all these varying degrees of depth that he has to be concerned about. Once the beeswax image is complete, sometimes it took a couple of months, then a plaster mold would be made. And once the plaster mold was set, then we could put the porcelain clay into the mold and press it down and get the images that we need. And when we had enough, they would go into the kiln and be fired at about 2,000 degrees. Now, because of this difference in depth, there was a lot of warping and cracking, so not a lot of them came out. Maybe 40% came out to be really good, useful lithophanes. Now, some of the lithophanes that we have here in this case have color, and that would have been an additional process. Once it was out of the kiln and cooled, it would be hand painted with a special artist glaze and then refired at a lower temperature to give us the colored lithophanes that we have here. So in this case, we have a lot of different lithophanes that shows you a variety of the kinds of subjects that we had. Sometimes they would come from famous paintings of a battle, and you can see the figures of the soldiers on the deck, and you can see all the different degrees of smoke and cloudiness that's here. Sometimes they would come from a folk tale. So this is a wonderful folk tale, and we see the two lovers there. And if you look way back in the bush, you see that they have some company lurking back there in the area. Sometimes they would come from a famous painting, like the discovery of Moses in the rushes over here. And And sometimes they would come from a photograph, like the photograph taken from the balcony of a chapel over here. Okay. Now up above this case, we have some examples of what were called light shields. But let's remember, this is the 19th century, and the light source is going to be a candle, or it's going to be the wick of an oil lamp, probably whale oil at that time, but there's a flame, there's a flicker, there's a charm that our little old light bulbs sitting here just don't quite give to the images that we see in the 21st century. Now sometimes another way to use a lithophane would be as a chandelier or an overhead light. So you see some of the examples that are here, and so, most of the time there would be a theme, maybe some pictures that have mythology background. Sometimes there would be scenes of families and children. Sometimes the scenes are religious. There would be a whole variety of kids playing and things along those lines. Mr. Blair was also a collector of Wedgwood. So we have a little bit of his Wedgwood collection that's right in this area, but you can see that his Wedgwood collection kind of went along with the same idea of the Lithophanes and how the Lithophanes were used, so that we see the figures and we see that once we have the illumination, the figures come through. Mr. Blair also collected cutouts, and unfortunately we don't have any of his cutouts here. Mr. Blair also collected music boxes. And he was actually at a meeting about music boxes in Berlin, Ohio, when he came upon his first Lithophanes that the gentleman at the home they were at had. And he inquired about them and had his first adventures in New York looking for Lithophanes with his brother at Christmas time. And another way to use Lithophanes would be as the special treat when you tipped up your teacup or your mug. So if you got your last sip and you tipped it up to the light, there would be the special treat of the lithophane that was there. And since this was part of the porcelain factories in Germany, if you're going to put lithophanes in the bottoms of the teacups, of course, you're going to put lithophanes in the bottoms of the beer steins. Now, across the way, we have the largest lampshade that is a lithophane. And you can see that this is a very popular image in Europe with all of their mountains and the Alps and all those wonderful things. And remember, it's the 1800s, so we have a lot of interest in hiking and hunting and fishing and all the wonderful activities. And so this image appears in a lot of the lithophanes that we have around here. Now, if you're going to have the largest, you're going to also have the smallest. And even in those tiny little lithophanes, you can see the wonderful detail that those artists carving back there in the beeswax were able to accomplish, even in these little ones.